many people know him, but of course I do want to remind everyone that Tourism Vancouver represents over 1,000 businesses and is responsible for the market development of Metro Vancouver as a convention, incentive, and leisure travel destination. Part of our hopes for Culture Days, as it gains more recognition in our communities, is to see that people will begin to travel to other cities to experience and explore Culture Days in other cities and towns. So our connection to tourism is a very strong connection and is a really good connection. A little sidebar, Rick is also the person that put me in an apron and made me carve a turkey in front of hundreds of people, so I'll never forgive him for that. But I do wear my Tourism Vancouver apron all the time. Rick, over to you.
Thank you, Lucille, and just for the record, I am one of those non-dead fathers who's supposed to be Thank you very much. And while I was invited to have about 15 minutes to chat about a few things, I'm going to work to wrap it up in under 10, which I'm sure will please each and every one of you here. And I was encouraged to talk a bit about tourism and culture and how residents and visitors entwine, but also a little bit about a notion that we've been working with at Tourism Vancouver. We didn't create it, but we're apostles of it, which is people thinking and how that relates to culture and to what's happening with Culture Days. And then just a little bit at the end about my own personal participation as an author during Culture Days with Word on the Street, which I'm really intrigued to learn more about because it'll be my first gig doing that kind of thing. But to begin, the importance of tourism to the Metro Vancouver area, and indeed so many of the communities across our country which are going to be participating in Culture Days, is becoming heightened. And that's because if you look at the 4 or 5 main reasons that people visit Vancouver, they parallel the 4 or 5 main reasons that each of us has decided to call that home. And top of those often are things about geography or perhaps the dining scene or sense of safety. But intrinsic always, when visitors are coming, and for us who decide that we're going to stay here, it's often about culture. It's about the destination's personality. It's about why we feel that we want kids and grandkids to be growing up here, and we want our parents to be here, and we choose our friends. But oddly enough, culture isn't a main motivator on some of the top 3 or 4 for why people choose to visit Vancouver. It might be to go to London, it might be to go to New York, but that is changing. Where it's really impactful, where culture plays a vital role in tourism and in the way that the visitors spend, is first of all in extending their average length of stay. Many people come for a couple of days. When they find out how vibrant, how active, and the great variety of things that they can experience that relate to culture, they often add on an extra day. That's very important. Think about it. What else would increase 50% in somebody's spend? But the other area is that it motivates those who are nearby visitors, so rubber tire traffic, say from Portland, or from Seattle, or Bellbridge, Columbia, so those from Alberta, for return visits. Many people come back a second and a third time each year, motivated by the cultural activities that they have discovered. Theaters that they never would have found about at home. Ideas that friends and relatives, 25% of the traffic that we get here that's visitor traffic, is coming to see friends and relatives. And it's those friends and relatives, perhaps things like Culture Days, discover how important culture is here. And that's what they then invite their visitors to go out and to experience. So it's terribly important. Paul Santz, one of my colleagues, is here, and Paul is the cultural tourism manager at Tourism Vancouver, also runs tickets tonight, which ties us as a marketing organization into dozens and dozens and dozens of events and performances and companies that are wanting to tap into the important visitor market. And many visitors, when they're there, are when they're local. They're tied together. I mentioned a bit about the concept of cathedral thinking, and this is something that is centuries old. So we're not the inventors of it, though as I mentioned, we're advocates of more of this thinking, because at its heart, cathedral thinking is about the long-term view. The notion of cathedral thinking, and I'll talk about how that relates to culture, is out of the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, where one of you was to be an architect and given the assignment to design a cathedral. You would know that your drawings were about something you would not live to see. If one of you or a bunch of you were stonemasons and you were involved in laying the foundation stones or the cornerstone of the cathedral, you would know that you'd not be there when the steeple was being built or when the final access was being put on. If you were an architect, you would know that it could be your grandson or granddaughter who was completing the task. If you were a stonemason, you would know that it was generations hence that would be completing the task. So the notion of cathedral thinking is about doing something today that is intrinsically good, that you yourselves, we ourselves, may not be able to be part of completing. An example at hand would be those who initiated the first bid to bring the Olympics here. They did that in 1960. Then many of the same people did that again in 1970. And what we ended up in 2010 being able to do was to see that many of the people who first had that vision and had passed it down to generations of their own family, over the decades it was modified. But in 2010, we all got to deliver, along with the grandchildren of many of those early visionaries, and host the world and deliver on their vision. Their dream became true because they were cathedral thinkers. They were doing in their day things that they never got to live to see them come to fruition. So culture in Vancouver today seems so important to the personality that we take, to how we define ourselves, to how we want the rest of the world to see us, to how we take advantage of over 52% of our fellow Vancouverites speaking another first language. How we realize that in the average Vancouver school there are 41 different first languages spoken. It's phenomenal. Not everybody else can bring that together. And it's the cultural community that helps us learn from one another to celebrate our differences. And cultural days is absolutely fundamental to all of us in this community and in the tourism industry, realizing that this spreads 365 days a year. We just get to focus on it now, which leads me nicely to just a short comment about what I've been learning and when I was invited to participate with Word on the Street. My book titles aren't important. Me being a writer isn't important. What's important is that Culture Days creates an opportunity for those of us who want to share the frustrations of our craft or the many successes, or want to sit next to others who practice the same craft and learn from them, or want to attend other events. This is unlike anything else that happens in culture. As everybody in this room knows, usually you're there and you're wondering what's going on behind the scenes. And what Culture Days does so well is bring it in front of all of us and lets us be a part of it. Howard Jang, who's here, who was our, you know, and was our board chair last year, was a big contributor to our looking at cathedral thinking. And in fact, our annual general meeting last year in June happened at Christchurch Cathedral, which provided a wonderful stage. And the presentation was opened by Christopher Gaze, and then worked its way back through the explanation of cathedral thinking to Howard, who was talking about our organization, tourism and community needing to look out to 2020. And perhaps we should be looking out longer. When we brought it right back to today during that presentation, Dean Peter Elliott of Christchurch Cathedral closed it by talking about the importance of everybody gathering around structures and culture and helping to define their city. If we do it right, if we are cathedral thinkers, we can be looking not just at 2020, but at perhaps 2050. Or if we're bold enough as those in the early 60s looked 50 years out and saw that eventually the world would be hosted here for the Olympic Games, we could even begin now to have our own cathedral thinking about culture and Vancouver and where we'll be when this country of ours celebrates its bicentennial in 2060.